got the same setup as the other thing, this H jig, where you got a mouth here. It's a great thing to carve out, and then your kids get to paint it. And you carve out a sort of tail here, and the line, you can see the line on there. The line just goes around it. Hey, it's Greg here with Outdoors on the Cheap, and I thought I'd do a video here talking about alternatives to your standard, Walmart, Canadian Tire fishing rig. Now these are relatively inexpensive to buy. You can get, I don't know what this one is here, what brand it is, Berkeley, and I think I got it for 25 bucks, rod, reel, line, and all, sort of thing, right? That's a relatively inexpensive way to get set up. What if you got 2 or 3 or 4 kids, right? You're gonna need to just multiply that by 2 or 3. Or what if you're like me, and even when you go ice fishing by yourself, it's handy to have multiple rods. Even if you've got rules like I do here, where I can only have one rod in the ground, one rod in the water at a time if I'm by myself. I like having multiple rods so I can rig each one up differently, so that if I don't like a lure that I'm using on one, I can use a lure in the other. I have to be tying all of that in the winter, and you don't have to waste any time doing that. So if you're going to have multiple $25 rods, well, now you spent $100 because you bought 4 rods, right? So whether it's because you got kids or you just want to have different options, you don't want to be frigging around with setups and line and stuff like that, here's some cheap ways that you can make other ice fishing rigs, okay? So here's one thing here. Now this little reel, I got at a yard sale for like $1. And these reels tend to be cheap. I'm sure you can find these on eBay for $2, right? And they're kind of great because they have a rattly thing in them, right? When the reel turns, if you walk away from the reel, you can look. It's got a little simple drag here that you can adjust, right? And if the reel's turning, it makes a noise, right? So really low tech, really robust, great in freezing cold temperatures. I mean, where I fish, I'm usually fishing in shallow water, and I'm fishing for brook trout, so I don't need the most sophisticated gear, and I don't need amazing drags. It's rare that you get anything bigger than that, sometimes you do, but it's rare, right? You could be pickerel fishing, and they're bigger than that. But in the winter, everything's a bit slow and a bit, punchy anyway, so you don't need amazing gear. Anyway, the rod I'm using here was actually a full-length fishing rod that broke. So I just took the end of it and jammed it into the base and electrical taped them together. For that matter, this reel really didn't marry up with this rod handle that well. So I electrical taped that on. And that electrical tape's been on there for, I don't know, 10 years. Electrical tape's you should always have a little bit of electrical tape in your kit because it can fix anything and it lasts forever and it's waterproof and it's just the greatest thing ever. Anyway, so that's one idea, is just take an old broken rod. Rods are hollow, so if you've got a broken part, I basically just cut it with a hacksaw and shove the skinny part into the fats part. I wrapped some tape around the skinny part so it was just the right diameter to sort of mix in, and then I electrical taped it together. Sure, there's cooler things you can do if you want to play with fiberglass or whatever, Mighty Putty or JB Weld. Electrical tape's just fine. All right, so that's one idea. Just use an old broken rod and find one of these cheapy reels here. Sometimes you can get these, if you're in a dollar store, they have little kids kits. Those things are just fine. Little baby fishing rods, that's another idea, I suppose. Little fishing rods they have for babies can work as well, but they tend to be closed-faced, and sometimes that gear is unreliable in freezing cold temperatures. Here's another thing you can do, and this is really low budget, but I've caught trout on this, and I've caught smelts on this. It works. So I got this idea, the idea of an H jig, right? Where you've got a piece of wood with a bit of a V, and you can just wrap the line around it, right? You tend to be fishing in the shallower water anyway. 10 feet or less is, I really don't have much luck catching, for me, brook trout and smelts and pickerel, chain pickerel, in anything deeper than that. So that's the depth I like, and I've got about 20 feet of line on this, right? For eyelets, you just get these you get these at the dollar store. This one's a bit big, but you get the idea. A little eyelet like that, and you just pre-drill and screw it into the wood. You only need 2, right? You're not fly fishing here, right? For the end one here, I pre-drilled a hole in the end, and then I bent the eyelet so it would go down, right? So the eyelet, just took it and put it in a vise, or you could use vice grips. 2 pairs of vice grips would be fine. Bent it, right? So the eyelet would go down. You could do the same thing with various kinds of wire. I'm sure you could do that with just simple wire, right? So that's an idea. This is really simple and easy to set up. And after I made this, I got a great idea. I did this when my kids were a bit younger, for a craft to do with the kids. So I thought, why not have the rod be its own rod stand and everything? So this here rod, it's just from a block of wood. It's a piece of 2x3, spruce 2x3, right? Pretty cheap. You can usually get for next to nothing people usually throw this stuff out, right? Any block of wood you can use for this. Make sure that there's a section of it about 4 inches long that's flat, so you can set it down. So this thing just sits on the ice. I got a little bell on the end, so if there's any sort of action, makes a noise, until it tips over. It's far enough back from the hole. This will not go down in the hole, right? It'll just, it'll fetch up, I've got a hole that's about, people are always worried about their rod being pulled into the hole because they see that in movies. My ice auger makes like a 4.5 inch hole, maybe 5 inches. It's a very small hole. And you've got the tip right over that hole, right? So the rod tips over, it goes flat like that. That's not going to get dragged in by any fish I'm going to catch, right? It's more likely, if you had a super fish, it would break the tip off the rod at the most, right? Anyway, it's got the same setup as the other thing, this H jig, where you got a mouth here. It's a great thing to carve out, and then your kids get to paint it. And you carve out a sort of tail here, and the line, you can see the line on there. The line just goes around it. Right, you use like 8-pound test, right? You could go 6, you could go 4. Really depends on your confidence and how big your fish are. All right, and then same idea, you got those little eyelets, right? Just using, sort of dollar store eyelet kit, or just wire. You could bend wire into a loop, bend it sideways, electrical tape it on. That would be totally fine. It would work totally fine. Again, these are spare rods. To tell you the truth, I've actually caught more fish on this than I have with this one. Because I kind of enjoy going out ice fishing and everybody's there with their expensive gear. And I'm at least keeping up, if not exceeding them, using this little number. And sure, you can't reel it. But if you ice fish enough, most of the time you just pull the thing up anyway. And even if you pulled it up as high as you could reach and it was still too deep, just like fly fishing, you just grab the line and pull, sort of thing, right? So you pull it through your hand, trapping it down with your thumb to retrieve, just like you do if you don't know anything about fly fishing. It's rare that you're actually playing the fish, for trout anyway. When you hook a fish with your fly fishing, you hook the fish and you just start pulling the line and trapping it with your thumb. Pull, trap with your thumb, pull. You're sort of running it through the crook of your thumb. You can do the same thing with this. But most of the time, the fish is just in the water. You pull it up and it's out of the hole. Right, but the great thing about this is that it's its own rod stand. And it looks like a narwhal. So that's one. Now, another thing I did, same basic idea. I was at the dollar store and I noticed they had these 2 broken, piece of crap baby rods. The rods were really small and the reels were broken, and there was cheap plastic reels. So I said, hey, I'll buy those for 50 cents each, and they gave them to me. And I took them home and I smashed the reel off because it was broken and useless anyway. And then I just drilled a hole into these 2 blocks of wood, right? And carved little narwhals into them. And the kids decorated them. This is when they're a lot younger. They're sort of like teenagers now. Anyway, I still take them out to the lake because I can have them rigged up with different things, right? I got a little bell where the spout would be, so it makes a noise. Right, just enough to get your attention if you're staring off into space or talking to someone, or relieving yourself in some way. All right, so as you might guess, this one was my daughter's. Anyway, some ideas for cheap alternatives for ice fishing. If for whatever reason you need more than one rod and reel, or you're just on hard times and you don't have anything, or you can't get to the store because of lockdown conditions or whatever, but you're near a lake, you can throw something together just using simple stuff. You don't, I think there's a We have a tendency to see people doing stuff on TV fishing shows and think we need what they have to do what they're doing. You don't. You know, some of the best fishing I ever did was just with a stick and a line. It's still fun. I'm 49 years old. I still love bringing stuff in on a stick and a line and a hook. I think I like it more than anything else. It's like I'm getting away with something, right? So, yeah. I mean, this literally was from a little bush that grew out in the backyard. Right? So it's not hard to get anything like that. Now, the main thing is you got to get it dried out. But you just, you know, you get a stick like this, you bring it in, you peel it, you leave it by the heater overnight, it'll be dry enough to deal with the next day. You don't have to paint it white like this. I was just trying to make this resemble a narwhal. You know, with my really, really, really poor carving and painting and decoration and artistic skills. Anyway, some cheap ways to make rods for ice fishing. I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Until next time, enjoy the outdoors on the cheap. Thanks for watching.